town of Stolac spread around the hills. The houses were all up there, and the family cemeteries were in the valley. All this used to be a cemetery where the old town center is now. There were no houses. Our house was full of kids. Mother was a strong woman. Father used to go off to work. She ran the household, fed us. We weren't afraid of him one bit, just her. She was strict. Now I understand why. She'd scold me when I ran around kicking the ball. And when Mother yelled at one of us, we'd all cry.
When the war started, and this was very unusual for Stolac, the first to arrive were the paramilitary from Bileća from Montenegro. They arrived at a city cafe. They took a seat, had a drink. A colleague of mine said, "Let's have a coffee together." So I went. We sat down, had coffee. I found them okay at first. Then it changed. Some people from Stolac joined them, either willingly or unwillingly. When they blew up the monument that held the bones of the partisans who fought in the National Liberation War, that's when the war in Stolac started. It was 1992. The monument was blown up and several tons of bronze were stolen from the monument, disappeared. We know who did it.
We didn't have trainers back in the 60s. The only shoes you could get were these flimsy rubber shoes. There was no playground either. Those who had the rubber shoes, they were top dog. We were used to playing ball on rocky terrain, and the shoes would tear and get all scratched up. When Mother saw us, it was time to run.
Then the attack, the real attack. They were up on the hills and all around, mostly on Hrgud, the biggest hill. The name comes from Latin horridus, meaning dark, big, huge. I'd never seen so many bombs, not even on screen. The bombs were flying in from every direction. The first bombs fell around these houses here. The first hit an Orthodox house, then another house, then all the way to Čuprija, to the culture center, the stone building next to the restaurant San Pierre. They bombarded the houses one by one. While they were shelling, various paramilitaries entered Stolac on the other side, allegedly to defend it.
I remember back when I was a child, not even 10 years old, horses still trotted around town. One day, I swear, I was walking back from school, looking down, kicking a rock, when I saw a 1,000 dinar bill. Right there, trampled in the dust. So I snatched it. I couldn't believe my luck. I didn't even wonder whose it was, where it came from, or anything. I went straight to the shoe store to buy a pair of rubber shoes. 900 dinars. That's how much they were. I could have spent it on something else, but I didn't. I went home, straight to my mother, and said, "I have the shoes. Now stop bugging me."
Already in May 1992, they turned Dretelj into a concentration camp. Before the war, Dretelj was a Yugoslav National Army fuel depot, one of the largest. When full, it was allegedly worth $10 million. Imagine what a robbery that was. While some tortured, others stole. The concentration camp was like a cover for stealing. They knew what they were doing when they picked that location.
We played spikes, buttons, marbles. We also played this game called Territory. We'd draw a circle and split it up. Then we'd take a big old knife and aim. The part you hit was yours. We also made slingshots. In school they told us not to aim at the nests. If you hit a nest, you were in trouble. The school would call the parents, and if your hands were dirty or you didn't cut your nails, someone in the class would have you walk through the whole classroom exclaiming, "I'm such and such, I didn't cut my nails." Of course, it was effective. It might seem harsh to some today, but that's how it was. We would get up at stupid o'clock for school. We had to memorize how many tulips there were in the Netherlands, how many sheep in Austria. I once memorized the story by Branko Ćopić, When the Linden Tree Blooms. I learned the whole thing by heart. I really set my mind to it.
There, they first captured and tortured the Serb population, ordinary people from Stolac, Mostar, and the entire Herzegovina. They raped women. They tortured them. There were some Muslims among the torturers from Stolac as well. They were all Ustashas, regardless of name or religion. They harassed women, our neighbors, in the town. Everyone knows, but nobody talks about it. Suddenly, the Chetniks withdrew. It was because of the Boban Karadzic agreement in Austria to divide Bosnia among the Chetniks and Ustashas. There were throngs of soldiers withdrawing.
Of course, we preferred to play ball than study. We all played for the Iskra club in Stolac. There were pioneers, cadets, juniors. Some even reached the senior team. A guy from our generation went off to play for Leotar in the second Yugoslav league.
Then the Croatian defense forces called HOS came into town. The people in Stolac started joining HOS. There was no other army at first. They would approach people and ask them to join the Croatian forces. They'd start listing. You'd have breakfast, lunch, dinner, a box of cigarettes and a salary. I'd say 80-90% of people joined because they wanted to defend the town and because they wanted a salary. If you weren't in their army, how could you provide for your wife and children? We didn't know then what we know now. It was like this for a while.
I've had a few experiences here in my Stolac, on the old streets. We used to go out, do things. My friend and I knew each registration number by heart. Everyone was in some sort of a club since primary school. Some played ball, some were into gymnastics, some played music in the city orchestra. I played the snare drum in the brass band. Later I switched to trumpet. My neighbor was the president of the orchestra. I danced in the folklore ensemble, was among the best. Later I also took part in the drama club when they needed someone for a role. Rehearsals would be in the evening and I worked second shift. I'd get out before dinner and come back, but the guard had to note it down in case something happened. And then came the questions. Where were you? What were you doing? We traveled to Trbonja, Travnik, Mostar, Banja Luka, and Dubrovnik, all over Yugoslavia. Wherever we went, we had friends. They are still friends today, those who are alive.
Some of us went off in secret when we heard that a new defense unit was being formed in Rotimlja. We didn't share HOS ideology. That was the craziest thing. Our families were in Stolac, practically in the hands of HOS, and we were in Mostar fighting against them. It made no sense we were in Mostar and our families in Stolac, but that's how it was. No man could just sit and wait. We believed in an idea, a dream of an army that would go from Mostar to liberate Stolac, defend against Chetniks and Ustashas. An army that wouldn't steal or rob, but defend, save and protect. We were starving. We ate horse meat. There were 2 draft horses, Zekan and Rijan. We ate once a day a kind of stew. It wasn't the kind of food we normally ate. Then one night we attacked. Our army attacked the Croatian forces early in the morning at 4 o'clock. I happened to be there. We exchanged a few rounds, then nothing. No one attacked, no command was issued. At dawn we realized we were surrounded by the Croatian army. That's how it happened. We had to try and get out, save some weapons. I carried a grenade. Everyone carried something. We wanted to flee to Blagaj. We walked over a steep bridge on Rotimlja hill. The grenade was 120 centimeters in diameter, heavy. It had a fuse. Had it fell on the fuse, it would have blown everyone to pieces, not just me. It occurred to me that I should take the fuse off and put it in my pocket. A group of us moved in a column. We were about to step on the crossing when they surrounded us and opened fire, yelling, "You're surrounded." In other words, stop or we'll kill you. One group ran, and they managed to reach the other side. The column broke. I lay down. It turned out that those who lay down were captured, and those who ran escaped. They didn't shoot. At that point, the Bosnian and Croatian armies still weren't total enemies. From Rotimlja, we were put into trucks and transported to the concentration camp Gabela. It was June 93. At the same time in Stolac, they were taking people out of their homes, their workplaces, one by one. They'd force them onto trucks and send them straight to the camps. There was also looting. They looted enterprises, took the machinery, the equipment, all sorts of things. Then they moved it all to Metković and God knows where else. They looted houses too, one by one. Took other people's belongings. At first they claimed they were safeguarding it. Some of ours also took part in this.
We went to college in Mostar. There was a student service. We did all kinds of things. We dug foundations. For example, under Bijeli Brijeg in Mostar, all those buildings down there, it was all dug by the students. That's how they earned money. They also had loans, student loans. Then we graduated. Those who didn't study went straight to serve in the military for 18 months. Those who did served after. These were the very last gasps of the military. Compulsory service was shortened. Women talked about chastity, we talked about the shortening of military service. We were all liars. From today's perspective, the military was something very much abnormal. I always hated it, the weapons, the military. There were 14 of us on the ship. We were an auxiliary detachment. Something happened in Tivat and we headed to Tivat. In 1973, Italy was conducting an air maneuver. We transferred the troops to the front lines on the islands, Brioni. That was the first time ammunition arrived on the ship. Not practice ammunition, but real ammunition. We intervened with Italian fish boats entering our waters. We had to intervene. We sailed from Umag down to the Bay of Kotor to Tivat. Our detachment was called the Rescue Squad. When there was a holiday, say Labor Day on May the 1st, we'd go for the so-called leisure sail. We'd do surveillance, patrol, walk. There were the divers, they used the launch. That's what it was called, a smaller boat. That was the first time I ate mussels, black ones, oysters. At first I didn't like them, but later I couldn't get enough. They went down easily.
They took people to the bone hospital first, until the hospital was packed and there was no room. They tortured them. You can't even imagine it. From the hospital they took them to Dretel, Gabela and then Heliodrome. Once they took a man, a great fighter. Both of his sons were still active in Hos. He was brought to the camp because his name was, I don't know, Hus or Hasa or something. Sometimes Croatian soldiers would arrest you, and others among them would secretly tell you where you were going and what's happening. They'd give you cigarettes. They'd take care of you in the camp. Not everyone was the same, far from it. Some beat you, others saved you.
We worked. There were 6,500 workers in Stolac. There were public enterprises like Inox, Unis, RMK, then Metal, Iron and Steel Plant, BP House, Bone Hospital, Community Health Center, Tobacco Station, Stolac Winery, Hotel Bregava, designed by Zlatko Ugljen, our most famous architect, a real pearl. We had everything. Now the only employers are the municipality and the police. Everyone's crammed in there. Enterprises used to provide for everyone. If the salary wasn't enough, they'd give you a loan. Even the municipality gave out loans. There were taxes on land, on houses, and now there are no taxes. You can't imagine these new rich people now paying for their large houses, villas.
They took kids as well. There was this kid and his brother. One was 15 and the other had turned 18. Both football players, athletes, nice kids. They hid them from the Red Cross in Dretel camp in the tunnel. There were many more kids. Athletes still developing. They'd lose weight fast, half a kilo a day or more. A couple of months later, they took them to a hospital on the island of Korčula for rehabilitation, allegedly. The Red Cross did this. They'd ply them with steroids to make them look inflated. Then they'd invite television crews to show everyone how successful their project was. But none of the kids could raise their arms or climb the stairs. It was politics. It was all a game. They wouldn't allow them to come back to Bosnia or stay in Croatia. They displaced them all around the world, north to Scandinavia where no one wanted to live. It's always dark, ice cold. That's where they left them, pretending to save them. Afterwards, the IOM had these family reunification programs. The kids asked for their mothers and siblings to come abroad to save them from the war. Legally, they could ask for this. These foreigners, the IOM and UNHCR people, they'd often lose the visa forms. However, many children returned. I know this one kid, hard-working, an athlete.
Almost every household, 99% of Stolac, had someone in a band, brass band, tamburica band, folklore group, drama club, sports club, what have you. Actually, I'd say it was 100%. And then the scouts would say, let's go somewhere. We used to do marches. You did your alphabet flags. We went all over the place, wherever there was a competition or something. We used to prepare here in Stolac. They gave you a map, and you'd go looking for the marks they set, the leads. Then you found them, and they timed you and evaluated your orientation skills. That's how it went. Everything was normal. It really was.
You take on a different mindset in the concentration camp. You change. Not because you want to. I remember a man coming to the camp. He worked in Mostar under Croatian occupation. He came in a suit and a tie. He kept saying, "This must be a mistake. How come I'm here? This is a mistake." He couldn't comprehend that he was there just because of his name. It was like that for months. They were very proud people, ordinary people who suffered torture but never let their suffering show. You see a real brute of a man overwhelmed with fear. Then you see the small, frail man but steady as a rock. I'm talking about the mindset, the character. Sometimes they'd line us up in a choir to sing Croatian songs. They'd say, "Sing this one," and a man would start singing Sevdah. Sevdah. They'd beat him up and say again, "Sing this one," and he'd start singing a Sevdalinka all over again, only more beautifully. We were starved, exhausted, empty of everything, even fear. We thought about our families, but we didn't know anything about them. I often wrote letters and poems to my wife. I spread my arms for you and cry. I dreamed that I was beginning to forget you. So instead, I forgot the dream. Return to our ruined city, to our burned house, my young old lady. That's what I wrote. Maybe I've forgotten a line or two. At some point, the letters started arriving. I still have them. I received letters from my children as well. We were always looking for a way to survive. We were looking for an opportunity. Little things made us happy, like looking out the window for hours. We stood in solidarity with each other. Some got a chance to leave the camp, but they refused. They didn't want to leave the others. Croat neighbors would smuggle in food. Everyone knew someone in the camp. They'd bring it in secretly. Those who got the food would then share it with the rest. We shared things, cigarettes. We'd hide and share. If they caught you, you were done.
I also took part in 2-year labor actions. One was in Belgrade in '62, a federal labor action. We were building the road to Turkey, the one that went through Bulgaria. I was also in Zagreb, although I didn't do much hard labor. I was appointed to a children's home as a moral educator. If a child made a mistake, I was there to talk to them, advise them, set them on the right path.
We got hold of a radio somehow. In the greatest secrecy, one person would listen to the radio, and news would spread from mouth to mouth like lightning. We spoke in codes. Then we got lice. We wouldn't wash ourselves. We were full of lice. We joked about it, saying nobody would want to beat us anymore. One man somehow got a pocket knife. He created something from every piece of wood he found. He'd carve the wood and make things. He made a pipe, for example, inserted the bullet into the wood and carved it all around. It was great. When they closed the heliodrome, they wanted to release 50 of us and kept the rest. We told the Red Cross nobody was leaving until everyone was released. That's how it was.
Winters used to be harsh with lots of snow. Now, not so much. We used to get these meter-long icicles. There's no winter now at all. Nobody knew what being a Serb, a Croat, or a Muslim meant. Youngsters nowadays have a hard time believing it was so. It was not a rich childhood, but a happy one.
The torturers were a motley crew. Some were drunk, some drugged. Their job was to torture people, put politics into action. Some were young. You'd see a kid and he'd already caused so much misery. What could he expect from the future? There was this one foreigner from Sweden. They called him the Black Devil, a volunteer of some sort. He was in that paramilitary unit, Ludwig Pavlovich. He was the worst. He taught the local guys how to be evil. Who knows how he ended up there? All kinds of political interests were in play. Our side caught him somewhere, convicted him and took him to prison. Then the Swedes got him out, saying there was no evidence. He later killed some cops up there and was sentenced to life. It's not an easy thing, getting rid of evil. The evil gets to you. That's the truth. I see the torturers who were never convicted. Even though justice never arrived, they could not escape from the devil. One sleeps in the park, begs for a beer. Another's child is a drug addict. A third killed himself. There is no goodness in it, no progress. When the Dayton Peace Agreement was signed, it didn't mean much for Stolets. Every so often someone would open fire. After Dayton, they blew up all the houses. The Begovina neighborhood was set on fire again. So were the mosques and the mills. They didn't want us to return, but people did return. For the foreigners, the returnees were a pilot project. Can you believe that? They treated people like guinea pigs. But whenever there was trouble, they were nowhere to be found. Donations were given out for the return. If you got a donation to repair your house, you had to invest as much to move in, but never mind. Step by step, we fixed up the houses. There used to be 200 children swimming here next to the house. Now there's nobody to even pick a pomegranate. They named the street after someone I never heard of. It doesn't matter. Everyone still calls it by its own name. Some things never change.